So, so we are going to be talking about one of the main features of human design, one of the predominant things. If you're new to human design or even a bit more experienced, you'll see when you look at your profile, no matter where you get it from, there are two numbers that are called your profile. It'd be like a 4-1, me, 4-6, Fabrice, 1-3, 2-4. There's a whole number of different profile options that you could get. So there's these two numbers, and it's like, what are these numbers for? Where do they come from, and what do they mean? So I'm gonna have a go, just a really like super quick glance of like summary of how we kind of get to these numbers. And it's kind of technical, so I'm not going to go into any of the technical details, and it doesn't actually matter. And then we'll actually go into unpacking why these numbers are important and and what they mean without being too specific at this particular point. So human design is based off of astrology, which is based off of basically where the stars are in the universe, and the energy moving from stars through planets into our body at the moment of birth. And so kind of how that's done is there's these things that are called neutrinos, and these are starting to get studied more and more in mainstream science. Neutrinos are a real thing. You can go look that up. And they are particles that are moving slightly slower than the speed of light. Am I right there?
Yeah.
And because that they actually are matter, they're not light, they're matter, and so they contain packets of information, but they're so small and moving so fast that they actually move through solid objects, and they're being put out by these large objects in our universe, right? And they're traveling through the universe, carrying information around, and these are, it might sound kind of out there, but I just believe that our science probably hasn't gotten to the point where we can study something like that. But we've gotten to the point now where we can understand that through nanotech, we can actually create, like, store huge amounts of information in very tiny little things. And so why can't the universe do that too? That's an aside. So
Well, in science knows the piece, like we know that neutrinos carry information, but they're not connecting it at all to systems like astrology.
yeah,
That's the gap that still has to be bridged.
yeah.
So it's like the science is there for neutrinos, but they're still learning really what it is. And human design and we, with those systems, make the connection between the two.
Totally. So the human design is, and when you look into the origins of it, it's like, it's pretty like, you know, I'm surprised by how much of a cheerleader I've become for the system, because actually, when you look at the origins of it, it's pretty wacky and far out there. It was essentially given to some dude on Ibiza by a voice that talked to him for 8 days and 8 nights and told him this system. And you go, what the hell? How can that have any merit? You know? But then he dedicated the rest of his life to explaining and disseminating this information, and a lot of people listened enough to pay attention and run it as an experiment. He always presented it as an experiment. Here's an experiment. Here's the information. Here's how you calculate your design. You look at it, try it out, act in accordance with your design, and see what happens to your life. And if your life gets better, qualitatively better, then does it even matter necessarily if science is able to determine, like, validate it or not yet, which it may do. And so lots of people have run that experiment, myself included. I've been in the experiment for about 4 years. How long have you been kind of in it for?
I mean, I first heard about human design and looked into it like maybe 10 or 9 years ago, but it's been like deep into it maybe about 5 years or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned about it maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and I've been deep into it maybe the past 2 years. And the more I understand about my design, and the more I like try and shift my life to live in alignment with it, the better things actually do get. The more I feel like the relief of being me. Like, I don't have to try so hard to not be things that are like, to be things that are not me. So that's the value of it. And then essentially, so, okay, coming back, we've got these neutrinos, these packets of information flying through the universe. And at the moment of our birth, we're hit with a bunch of them. And we're being hit all the time afterwards. But for whatever reason, that moment is critically important. And the information that they impart on us is what formats this design. Now, the way it relates to astrology, and don't worry if you can't fully understand these details, is that we have this big wheel in human design, which is basically the wheel of the zodiac, but overlaid onto it is also the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. And each of them are relating to different positions on the zodiac. So, for example, my conscious sun, and this is the profile is related to our conscious sun and earth, or our personality sun and earth, and our unconscious or design sun and earth. So my conscious sun is 52. That's the gate that it is. And that happens to sit in the zodiac of Cancer, and I'm a Cancerian. So at my particular time of birth, that is where the neutrinos pass from the solar system, the star sign, the star conglomeration of that we call Cancer, through the sun and imprinted my body. Now, then there's a subtle, slight variation. There's an increasing segment. So that's a segment that runs all the way around. Like we have our zodiac signs, and they run for, like Cancerians, it runs for almost 30 days, 28 days or whatever each zodiac sign runs through. But then in the I Ching, that passes through about, how many gates does that pass through? Like 6 or 8 gates?
Almost six, about five to six.
Five to
Yeah.
six gates that passes through. So that's one increment of division smaller than just Cancer, right? It's one increment of division smaller. And then we go one increment of division smaller, and we have 6 lines. These are 6 graduations. So it's a subdivision. So for example, we have Cancer, then we have the subdivision of 52, gate of stillness, or gene keep stillness, which is what I have in my conscious sun, my life's work. And then we have subdivision 0.4, which is line 4, which is the line I have. So my profile is a 4-1, which means that I have the 4 in my conscious sun and my conscious earth, because they're related to each other, and I have the line 1 in my unconscious sun and unconscious earth, and that gives me my profile. So what does profile even mean, and why is it important? Why do we want to care about this?
Yeah, well, stepping out of technicalities for a bit, and on a practical level, first of all, I find profile to be the most approachable piece of human design. I would say even more than type. When the first YouTube videos I made, the first course that I recorded, it was about the lines and the profiles, because it's as close as it can get to those personality systems and traits and and archetypes and all of that, because really it is about mostly your personality, and then when we go into the details, there's also your subconscious tendencies, but really all of that makes who you are really. And it's the easiest to see in yourself and in someone else, is the easiest and the quickest for you to have insights about. And so really is the most fun to start playing around with, because even if we go into types, okay, I can tell you that you are a manifestor and this and that, and you might be getting insights, I'm sure, but it's going to take you a while to start playing around with it, to start really the actual experiment, and to be in your strategy and authority and making decisions from this place and so on. Like it takes years, and I'm sure now you're still calibrating aspects of being a manifestor. So am I, being a projector. And so that piece, as much as most people would start with types, which I agree with, but because it's the foundation, it's not even the easiest to approach. Yeah. Profiles, and when you learn about your lines, you're a 4-1. I'm sure that the first time you heard about the 4 and the 1, you're like, oh yeah, and you can see it immediately in your life, and especially for relationships, and this is the workshop that we have coming up, Dating by Design, and this is a big part of the workshop is going to be focused on those lines and on the profiles. If you want to see your main relationship patterns coming out, it's going to be there. Yeah, we have the conscious line, the personality line, which is very much connected to how we connect to the outside world. So when we're going out to events, when we're networking, when we are even working, when we are even still in the dating phase, all of that. And this is really what people see us as. And then there is the unconscious line, the stuff that comes out more like in our private life. And so with the people closest to us, you might have to live with the person to start seeing those things, or be in a deep relationship with them, or maybe the family knows it. And even those are things that we discover about ourselves over time. It's not the obvious stuff. And the combination of those two gives you a really unique relationship blueprint and different patterns. And once you know this about yourself, well, you know your own needs, you know your shadows, you know your gifts as well, and how to tap into them. And same for your partner, you know, if you're in a committed relationship. And it's like, okay, like how to work with that, how do those types, you know, how do those lines and profiles interact with each other, you know. And that's, again, keeping it, you know, focusing here on the relational aspect, which I think is the biggest value when it comes to really the whole system, but especially the profiles. um yeah, you know, that's what it's here for.
Yeah, well, I mean, and what I love in that is it's like, okay, the type, manifestor, projector, whatever, it's really that really relates to how we use energy. It's like how energy moves through us, how we relate to the world of energy. You know, projectors kind of have penetrating energy, manifestors have kind of
Yeah,
initiating.
it's the aura. Yeah.
It's the aura type. But the like as you said, the profile is really much more closely related to personality. You know, and it's like you said, the 4-1, it's like it didn't when I started learning about what a 4-1 is, it didn't impact me the same way I learned in the Enneagram. Okay, I studied the Enneagram for a while first, and I learned I'm an Enneagram type 4, and that was like whack. Oh my goodness, this fits for me. But in a way, it's like the Enneagram feels, you know, true, but I kind of have dropped that system largely because I find human design so much more encompassing, because it doesn't just talk about personality, it talks about energy, it talks about my vocational tendencies. Like there's so many more nuances available to understand about who I am through this system than anything else I've actually explored. And I love to explore everything, you know, as a unconscious line one investigator, I can't help myself, you know. But as I started diving in and understanding this profile more and more, it started to make really more sense, and it actually continues to unlock. And what I love what you said as well, it's like I think of the first line in the profile, for me it's a 4. That's who I am when I leave my house. That's who I am when I'm out in the world. That's who I am when I show up on a live. That's who you're going to see. That's who you're going to interact with. That's the persona that relates to the world. And we usually probably think that's who we are in a way. And you know,
And we're both line fours in this case.
both line fours, you know, so we have this kind of influential mind. I can be somewhat inflexible, as anyone who's tried to debate me on my Facebook feed has probably encountered. You know, I'm not necessarily interested. I'm interested in exploring truth, but I'm not necessarily interested in trying to have my mind changed. But I'm also an opportunist. You know, in the line 4, I tend to like go to social situations because actually I'm not, unless it's a really good party. We were both jamming about this the other day. If it's a really good party, I'm going for a, you know, party or an experience. But usually I'm going out to socialize because I'm networking, and I'm an opportunist. This is what they call the line 4. I'm an opportunist. I'm looking for what are the potentials available to me to further my life's work, to do something in the world, you know. And generally all of my opportunities in life have come through a networking opportunity. And so something that was really interesting, just as a little aside, we're not going to go into all the lines, but we're just wanting to touch on it here, is when I tried online dating. There's been periods of my life where I've tried online dating, and it has never worked for me. Never
Yeah.
worked. I can have the wittiest conversations with people, and I can like tweak my profile forever to try and get it really right, and it's never gone anywhere. I've never had anything meaningful. There was a period of time where I got really active on online dating. I probably went on 30 or 40. Just didn't work. Like it just always felt off. However, I've also dated through Facebook. I've dated through people who I've related to on my profiles. We've commented on each other's profiles, and that's really worked for me. And that's an aspect of the line 4. My opportunities are going to come through my networks, including my dating opportunities. Um, and last little point I want to say is then the second line of the profile is who we're going to be behind closed doors. So, you know, how it relates to dating is you'd start dating someone on the first 2, 3, 4 dates, depending on how fast you move. You know, first few weeks, first month or two, you're going to be interacting with a person who shows up in a certain way. And at some point, the relationship hits a point of intimacy where you're actually starting to spend more time in private than you are in public. You have a private relationship. When you first start dating, you have a public relationship. You go and meet in a cafe and you're kind of getting to know each other's personas. But then you start becoming sexual and you start spending time, you're sleeping over and you spend time in the same space, and you're now behind closed doors in private. And suddenly the person starts to be different. You start to see different aspects in them that you've never encountered before. And this is the second line. This is their what we call the unconscious or the subconscious or the design or the body aspects of their personality are going to start to emerge. And for all of us, it's like ways that we kind of know who we are, but we like it's like you kind of can't grasp it with your mind. It's kind of just there. It's who you are, but you have to kind of look at it in a weird way to actually make sense of it.
And yet it's who you really are,
And yet it's
in this
really,
life at least.
yeah.
Like your real quality of being is found in that second, in that unconscious line. The personality line is way more connected to the doing, to being out there and doing the work and being in the world. Whereas, when we're just more into being, and again, that comes out more in our, personal relationships and so on, it's more the unconscious line. And what's really interesting in our case, okay, so you and I, you're a 4-1, I'm a 4-6. Our personalities are very similar. We might, I'm a projector, you're a manifestor. There's going to be different, shades of it, but nonetheless, both fourth line personalities. But then you look at our conscious lines and we couldn't be further apart. You're a first line, which is the most grounded of all, and I'm a sixth line, which is on like the other end of the spectrum. And so that's where the polarity is really interesting. And so most likely in our relationships, we're going to be very, very different people.
Yeah, and it, my partner who I'm dating right now, she's a sixth line, so we have that massive spread, and it can be a point of contention between us. But the more we've understood, and actually honor it, like and that's what the beauty of understanding this is when you understand, and this is something I can't emphasize enough, and something that I will continue to emphasize is like I think we all have this biased tendency it's like a blind spot to believe that because this is the way that I make sense of the world, then so everyone else must make sense of the world too in the same way.
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
massive blind spot because it's not true. And so what happens, we start getting into relationship, and this is my personality tendency. So for example, I need to be connected to my social network. That's something that it's a need for the line 4, right? And I assume that everyone else should want and need the same, but that's not true. My partner is a line 3. She doesn't have the same needs. She needs novel circumstances. She needs newness and freshness and difference. Going to kind of like, I like to go to networking. I go to social events where I know some people, and I know some people I'm constantly touching in, and I'm building a connection over time because there's an opportunity that can form from it. So that's a regular touch point that I really value. For her, it's not relevant. It's just not even, it doesn't even occur to her as something that would be relevant. So this can be a point of friction. We're actually oppositionally designed. Same with the 1 and 6. We're oppositionally designed, right? But when we start to learn, oh, this is the way you're constructed. These are your needs. These are your gifts. These are your shadows. You're different than me. And I can learn to honor, accept, support, and love the difference in you. Then friction actually turns to harmony and coherence. The first and the sixth line, so far apart in terms of the ways they view the world, actually start to support each other. My first line creates a groundedness and anchoredness in our relationship, creates a pragmatism, and it feels like something like tethered to reality. The sixth line creates this bigger visionary optimistic kind of perspective on what could be. And it's like, I actually love that. And I can't do it on my own. I don't have that same orientation.
Yeah, I like the analogy between the first and the sixth line. Like if we take the army analogy, it's like the first line is like down in the trenches, and it's like actually on the ground and knows the reality of the situation on the ground. And then the sixth line is like flying in a reconnaissance, airplane, and is like,
Yeah.
but this is how it looks from here, and giving insights from that, from that view. Another way to put it, I was watching the other day with my partner a documentary about animals, and it was like somewhere in a really, it looked so beautiful, those like helicopter shots from above. It just looked like so gorgeous. It was like on the edge of the desert in Africa, like, and meeting the, Atlantic Ocean, and just so beautiful. I was like, yeah, this is the sixth line view. It's just when you're always looking at things from above, it just looks kind of all perfect and optimistic, and then you go down and you see the reality, and it's just like pure fucking survival and struggle, and and those animals, they're just like trying to eat each other all the time, and the waves are just like hitting the rocks, and you just like, I was thinking, even myself, just being down there, it probably feels like super dangerous to be there, and it's just like, and the two, and it's not like one is better than the other, it's just the two have to inform each other.
Mm.
Yeah, and it's true in intimate relationships,
Definitely.
and it's also true in work dynamics, and in anything. We are here to exchange our views and to exchange keys. And so the sixth line has to get humbled, has to learn, to listen to the first line, has to get grounded by the first line, and the first line also has to trust and listen to the sixth line, and get some of this different perspective on things, and together they can work really beautifully, as long as, again, we understand who we are, who is the other, and how we can serve each other.
Totally. Totally. And that, and and that shows up, like, it's like when there's a point of friction, I'm like, "Y- you don't understand. That's like what you're thinking about is just so ungrounded. That's so far from reality as possible." And then we'll fight about it, like we'll get into a conflict about it, you know. Obviously we've learned not to do that because we start to understand each other. And similar, it's like but you don't see what I'm seeing, and you don't see the possibilities. And I'm like, it's like, but then we actually learn to each other. It's actually like, I love having access to that larger viewpoint. Like it feels like it holds a relational container for me to actually
Yeah,
be in. And then similarly, there's a love of like, oh, being connected to the ground, being anchored. It's like, it's almost like the sixth line can have visionary ideas and transmit it. And the one goes, right, I'm just going to start building that right now. I'm just going to start putting it into action. And that's how those two really relate to each other. And it's the same, no matter what combination of lines that we have, there is a relationship between them that is going to be dysfunctional and oppositional and friction based and like create conflict. And there's going to be one that's harmonious when we actually learn to understand and hear the other person's reality. And and again, that point of emphasis is like, you can't change it. You can't change. Like, we can broaden. I can broaden to go, okay, I can include a relationship to the way your sixth line views the world and the reality of it, but I can't change you from doing it, and neither can you. Like, that's actually just
yeah,
your orientation. And
yeah,
I think there's breadth. If we grow and we become really successful in our growth, we can broaden and kind of encompass more. But there's almost like there's a place we actually can't grow out of. There's actually
yeah.
something.
I mean, there's a learning that has to happen. We have to learn from every other line, from every other profile. We can get keys for ourselves, but our specialty is not going to change. We're still going to excel and have, our own unique gifts that are centered in that specific profile.
Yeah,
And like you said, that's not going to change, and there's no point in trying to make the other change. And in a way, it's human design is hard to sell, because you're selling the death of a lot of romantic ideals of relationships and fantasies. And I mean, even taking the relationships out of that, like, it's a very sobering system in many ways. And only when you first look at it, there's a technical aspect to it as well. It's like, oh, too many numbers and too dry,
all of this
and
stuff.
and so many boxes to it as well. And it's like, no, but actually when you go into it and when you really start understanding it, and when you receive proper guidance, which is super important as well, it's not just about reading a little bit of theory and trying to apply it. um, you understand it actually about removing all boxes, because you're getting conditioned nonstop anyways. You were getting conditioned by your parents from the moment of birth, from society, from Hollywood movies, from, like, if you think that you were being you in your relationships, you were not. And the whole point actually of human design is to be you, truly yourself, and to be able to accept someone else being themselves as well. I would say it's a more refined romance, and it can be very romantic and very beautiful and an amazing. You were writing today about the hero's journey, in relationships and connecting it to human design. It's exactly that. It's exactly that. It's for the brave ones, but it's definitely not for, you know we cannot sell you a Hollywood ideal in with those systems.
But at the same time, you can't be sold a Hollywood ideal. Yet, isn't it like, for me, it's like almost magical when I can look at, we can go, oh, like, here's this point of friction between us. There's a point of friction between us, and it's not making any sense, and I can't understand why we're getting stuck on this point, for example.
Yep.
And then we look to the design, and it's like it jumps out. Like, the more I study the design, the more I can intuitively kind of get a sense of, like, hang on, I need to look at this. And I'll pick up the textbook and I'll do some reading, and it'll be like, oh, that's our point of tension. And it's almost like we get to see the point of tension. It's just like, it's just there, and it's like, oh, we can just stop that. We just stop doing that. It's very easy. An example, and this is off the profile line, it's like, realize that my partner has a completely open ego or will or heart center. It's interchangeable names. And I have a defined one. And there is this way that my defined ego has been conditioning her to feel like she has to prove her worth in the relationship.
Yep.
And when we got that, and we like really got it, and she was like, oh, that's my not self. I don't have to do that. That's conditioning. She dropped it. It's like this little subtle conflict that was like tension that was running through just went away. And it's like, oh, there's more harmony here. And so that's the beauty of it. It's like, it's a manual for harmony. It's a manual for actually having what you want, having the kind of relationships. But it's like, you have to read the manual or learn the manual and then apply it at the same time. And then you get like results that are for real. Like, I'm like, I'm very much a non-religious, non-evangelistic kind of person. But when I find something that works, I'm like, I'm in. Like, I'm just going to use it. I'm just going to use it for all that it's worth.
Another way to put it is that human design is here to break us out of addiction to drama in relationships, addiction to, and again, that's why I said by Hollywood movies. It's because it's all based on drama. And it's not to say that there will not be any drama left or any stories left, but it's really just a way of like, okay, do you actually want to solve this issue? Are you actually interested to work? Do you really want to have like a better relationship? Do you want to smooth things out? Do you want to work with this person? Do you want to grow and evolve? If yes, then those systems will definitely help, and it can help you experience a level of relationship that you didn't know was even possible. Or you prefer to remain unconscious of those tendencies and to not look at them, and you kind of just still addicted to
change the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. And you just like to stay a victim and remain in those addictive cycles of drama, and that's fine too, but then definitely those systems you will not like them. Yeah.
I mean, just in closing, I have a prediction that human design is going to accelerate in popularity. It's going to become as commonly
It is already.
astrology. It already is.
It is already, yeah.
So it's going to be as discussed
Yeah.
as astrology. Like, in my communities, there's not many people who have gone really deep in the system, because it still hasn't, but similarly, there's not that many people who've gone deep in astrology. I know a few people who are astrological guides, and they've gone really deep in the system, and they can do really powerful predictive analysis on people based on their astrology. And you and I can do the same on people around human design now. I do it all the time. One of my housemate's sister was over, and I was just like casually like, give me your design. And I pick it up, and I just like, I look at it, I can't tell everyone everything that I see all the time. It's just like, that's too much. But I'm just like, oh, here's a couple of interesting things. And I tell her a couple of interesting things, and her eyes light up, and it's like, oh, that's so true. And actually she's a 3-5. So I told her about the 3-5, and she just like rolled around on the floor laughing. It's like, that's exactly me. And that's my life. The 3-5, I like to refer to as when they're living in alignment, they're living a life of beautiful chaos. Like they make beauty out of just a mess, and that's what they're here to do. And it was like, she's laughing, going just relief of like, oh, that is me, feeling really seen and validated, and like, oh, I'm not broken, because I experience life this way. I'm not broken. No, you're not broken. Actually, your design is incredibly beautiful, and every single person's is incredibly beautiful, you know? And that's what
Yeah.
I love about it. It's like every time I pick up a design, I'm like, I've never seen this before because there are no two designs the same. So
Yeah.
I'm always like, I've never
Yeah.
seen this before. Wow, how fascinating. Who are you? You know? Yeah.
That's exactly, the point of it's exactly the opposite of trying to put you into boxes, because there's actually only one profile like yours.
Yeah.
Nobody else has the same. There's always going to be a difference.
Yeah.
That's where you say it's beautiful. And that's what we'll be exploring on Sunday with the Dating by Design workshop. We're going to be, it's most likely going to be a series. We cannot teach everything at once about relationship in a few hours, but we're going to start with the foundation, which is types, and how types relate to each other as well. And then going into the lines and the profiles, looking at both the conscious and the unconscious, and, giving you time also to share, and communicate with each other and explore those profiles together, and hopefully giving you already a solid idea of who you are in a relationship, and how you can relate to others.
And how you can be more met, like actually like, oh, this
Yeah.
is what I need and this is what you need. Awesome. Let's just support each other in that.
Yeah.
Cool. Hope to see you there. I'm looking forward to it. I love this stuff. I can talk about it for a really long time, and I'm still investigating and loving the journey.
See you guys on Sunday.